Before anyone ever cracked a vault, we had to invent something far more dangerous than crime. A reason to commit one. We didn't create robbery. We built a world that made it possible. Before the getaway car, the silent alarm, the masked man with a plan, something had to happen. A lot of things, actually. We had to invent currency, then trust someone else to hold it, then protect it, then define what it meant to steal it, and finally, imagine a way to take it. The bank robbery didn't just appear, we built it, layer by layer, without even realizing. This is the story of how human progress, one invention at a time, accidentally created the perfect crime. Not just an act of theft, but the ultimate test of trust, power, and design. You're about to discover a history you were never taught. One where the vault was never the beginning. It was the end of a much older plan. Before anyone ever thought about robbing a bank, there had to be something worth stealing. Not food, not land, not livestock, but something far more dangerous. Value, in a form you could hold. Imagine standing in a dusty village in the Fertile Crescent, nearly 10,000 years ago. You're a farmer with 2 goats. You need grain. So, you walk to your neighbor and negotiate. You point to the goats, he points to a sack of barley. You argue, you barter. Eventually, you both agree. 1 goat for 2 sacks. But what if he doesn't need goats? What if his granary is already full? What if you don't want grain, but cloth? This was the flaw of barter. Slow, inefficient, confusing. You couldn't store wealth, you couldn't move it, and you certainly couldn't hide it. But something was coming. An invention so transformative, so deceptively simple, it would change everything. Money. Long before gold coins, money wasn't metal. It was meaning. Cowrie shells in the Pacific, beads, salt blocks, and iron tools in Africa and Asia, even cattle. These early currencies held value because they held belief. But they were flawed. You couldn't buy a loaf of bread with half a cow. You couldn't haul 10 sacks of salt across the desert. Society needed something better, smaller, sharper, standardized. Something that whispered, "Trust me." Around 600 BCE in Lydia, now modern-day Turkey, King Alyattes minted something revolutionary, a stamped disc of electrum, marked with a royal lion. This wasn't art, it was a promise. This metal had value because the king says so. The first standardized coins were born. For the first time, value could be measured, carried, traded far beyond your village, and crucially, hoarded. And where there's portable value, there's theft. Temptation had entered the economy. Coins now clinking in pockets, another question emerged. Where do you keep it? In ancient Babylon, the answer was sacred. Temples. Priests kept clay ledger tablets. Deposits were recorded, interest calculated, silver protected. These were the first bankers, but more than that, they were gatekeepers of trust. Robbing a temple wasn't just theft, it was blasphemy, punishable by exile, or worse. But centralizing wealth also centralized the target, and somewhere, someone was watching. As trade exploded from the Silk Road to Rome's ports, coins became passports. The Greek drachma, the Roman denarius, the Chinese cash coin, threaded in strings, trusted by peasants and princes alike. What gave a coin value? 3 things: authority, a king's seal; scarcity, just rare enough; and trust, the true core of currency. Because once people believe something has value, it becomes real. And once it's real, people will lie, cheat, and steal for it. Where there's real money, fake money follows. In China, counterfeit coins flooded the markets. In Rome, Emperor Nero diluted the denarius with cheaper metals. This wasn't theft with a knife. It was theft with a stamp. Forgery wasn't about taking coins. It was about deceiving trust. Value, it turned out, could be faked. And so could the system that issued it. By the Middle Ages, money had become more than a means of trade. It was a weapon. It built cities, bought armies, created dynasties. So we responded with counting houses, parchment ledgers, and transcontinental exchanges. Money had become capital, and capital breeds capital crimes. As wealth grew, rulers realized something. Money wasn't just economics, it was power. So they wrote laws: the Code of Hammurabi, the Lex Julia of Rome, rules that separated theft from robbery and robbery from rebellion. But even law couldn't kill desire, not when there was a faster way to wealth, a way that didn't ask, didn't wait, and didn't earn. And that's the paradox of money. It was made to bring order, but it planted the seed of chaos. Currency gave us trade, currency gave us empires, and currency gave us civilization. But it also gave us temptation, greed, envy, the dream of getting rich in a single act. Before the vault, before the lockpick, before the silent alarm, we had to invent the one thing every robber needs: something worth stealing. But once we had that, another question emerged. Where do you keep it? Coins could vanish, trust could be broken, and civilization, now wealthy, had a new problem: protection. That's when we stopped just trading money and started guarding it. Before someone could rob a bank, there had to be banks. And before banks, there had to be something even rarer: trust. Because storing value is one thing, but entrusting someone else with that value, that was humanity's boldest financial leap. Let's rewind 4,000 years. Ancient Mesopotamia. The city of Ur hums with trade: barley, textiles, silver. But inside the towering temples, something new is happening. People leave silver and grain not as offerings, but for safekeeping. Why? Because the temple was more than sacred. It was strong. It wasn't just a place of worship. It was a proto-bank. And the priests? The world's first bankers. Inside those temples, there were no pens, no spreadsheets, just clay tablets etched by hand. You might deposit 30 shekels of silver, 5 sacks of grain, a family heirloom. In return, a tablet, sealed by a priest's mark. Not just mud, a contract, a promise. But here's the twist. You couldn't bribe the priest, you couldn't hack the tablet, and you couldn't argue with the gods. Security wasn't enforced by walls. It was enforced by faith. Trust wasn't written into law. It was carved into belief. By 1800 BCE in Babylon, temples evolved into financial hubs. Merchant families loaned silver, charged interest, even issued promissory notes across cities. Deposit in one city, withdraw in another. A miracle of trust and a network of power. But something darker followed. What if someone broke that trust? What if someone took what was supposed to be safe? Banking wasn't just about storing anymore. was about protecting the target you just created. In 600 BCE, ancient Greece, temples still hold some deposits, but now, private moneylenders emerge in the open, the trapeziti. They operate from stalls, homes, marketplaces. They hold deposits, exchange currency, issue loans, and keep ledgers. But here's the shift. These banks weren't divine. They were human and fallible. Now, a robbery wasn't just possible. It made sense. Rome perfected it. The Argentari, the Mensari, the Numulari, each serving as silversmith bankers, public fund handlers, coin testers. The Roman elite trusted them with fortunes. Emperors used them to finance wars. Merchants ran shipping empires with their help. Banking became the engine of the empire. But every engine has a weakness. In Pompeii, we found a banker's house, Lucius Caecilius Jucundus. His ledgers were carved on wax and tablet. Now imagine, someone breaks in, steals the records, and burns the seals. That's not just theft. That's economic identity gone. This was the psychological birth of the bank heist. So, why does any of this matter? Well, because robbery only makes sense when wealth is centralized. 1 million coins in 1 million pockets, that's useless to a thief. But 1 million coins in one vault? That's a plan. To protect wealth, society concentrated it. But concentration breeds exposure, and exposure breeds temptation. By the 13th century, banking exploded across Europe. Florence, Genoa, Venice. Enter the Bardi, the Peruzzi, the Medici. They weren't hiding coins under beds. They ran branches, used bills of exchange, pioneered double-entry accounting. Banking became a profession, not a sacred act. But resentment grew. The poor called them parasites. The kings owed them debt. And the people, they knew exactly where the money was kept. And when resentment meets a locked vault, you don't just get a robbery, you get a revolution. And by the late Middle Ages, banks were no longer sacred. They were fortified. Vaults beneath stone buildings, iron gates, armed guards, hidden compartments. Gold moved behind caravans of mercenaries. The bank had become a machine of capital, but also a perfect target. Because the more you protect something, the more you prove it's worth stealing. So, what had to exist before someone could even dream of robbing a bank? The bank had to change. It had to stop being a temple and start being a business. It had to hold not just money, but power, records, secrets, dreams of those who would never hold the keys. It had to become a symbol, not just of security, but of inequality, a challenge. The modern bank is a marvel, but it also created something else, a single door, behind which lies everything you ever wanted. And all you have to do is open it. A coin could buy a kingdom or end a life. And as wealth poured in, so did anxiety. We couldn't leave treasure in the open anymore. So we built walls, locks, vaults, and guards. Not just to protect the money, but to protect the illusion that I was ever truly safe. Before you can rob a bank, you have to break into one, and that has never been easy. Because the moment we began concentrating wealth, we began fortifying it behind walls, behind stone, behind steel, behind mechanisms so intricate they became puzzles in their own right. This is the story of how we learned to lock up our riches, and in doing so, gave birth to the one thing every great robber dreams of, a fortress worth breaking into. Our journey begins in ancient Egypt, 4,000 years ago. In Thebes, archaeologists found something unexpected: a wooden door with a pin tumbler lock, the world's first of its kind. Here's how it worked: a wooden key inserted into a horizontal bolt, internal pins lifted, and if aligned, the bolt slid open. It was crude, but it worked. It wasn't designed to stop every thief, just most of them, because real security is psychological. A message, a warning. This is protected. As coinage became wealth, medieval societies needed new ways to store it. Enter the treasure chest. Wooden trunks bound with metal, fitted with padlocks, reinforced corners, hidden under floorboards, buried in castle walls. Inside, gold florins, silver ingots, ledgers, deeds, even relics. But every chest had one weakness: our key. And keys could be copied. Guards could be bribed. Chests could be smashed. Security then was force, not finesse. But the more we protected wealth, the more we inspired those who wanted to beat the protection. An arms race had begun. By the Renaissance, families like the Medici and the Fugger weren't just securing wealth, they were showcasing it. Vault rooms hidden deep within the stone palaces, doors crafted by master locksmiths, mechanisms with gears, tumblers, secrets. Locks weren't just barriers, they were encrypted puzzles. And for every artisan who built one, there was someone else learning to break them. The brute force thief was evolving. He became a craftsman, a forger, a blacksmith, a mechanic. Vaults created a new adversary, the lock breaker, and the game was on. In the Industrial Revolution, banks grew from counting houses into architectural fortresses. Cities boomed, wealth flowed, risk soared. Traditional locks, no longer enough. Too easy to copy a key, too easy to hold a guard at gunpoint. Then came a name: James Sargent. In 1880, he invented the time lock safe, a vault sealed by time. You could have the key, you could have the combination, it didn't matter. The vault wouldn't open until the morning. Now, robbing a bank wasn't about force, it was about outsmarting time itself. And with that, robbery became a puzzle. Why do we surround money with steel and stone? Not just to stop crime, but to project power. A 10-ton vault door doesn't just secure wealth, it announces it. It says, "We are untouchable, your money is safe here." But to a thief, that same vault whispers, "Everything you want is behind me." Security breeds desire. Obstacles breed obsession. And the better we protect something, the more valuable it becomes to steal. By the 1900s, banks weren't just secure, they were performing security. Vaults placed dead center in the lobby, doors designed like chrome-plated starships. Guards posed like statues, eyes forward, rifles ready. And inside, deposit boxes, bonds, ledgers, gold bars. The vault had become theater, and theater invites an audience. From the Great Depression mobs who dreamed of cracking them, to the Great Train Robbery of 1963, to the Hollywood legends, The Italian Job, Heat, Inside Man. The vault wasn't just a room anymore. It was a symbol. The vault evolved. So did the criminal. Lockpicks turned electric. Acetylene torches melted steel. Explosives got surgical, quiet, precise. Tunnels were dug, fake walls built, and identities forged. By the 1960s, vault cracking became a science. Blueprints stolen, managers' routines tracked, teams trained on replica safes, the heist crew became a formula. The planner, safecracker, the wheelman, the muscle, the insider. The vault had done something unexpected. It didn't stop crime, it elevated it. Today, most money? It isn't in the vault. It's data, encrypted, sharded, scattered across servers. And yet, we still build vaults. We still pose beside them. We still dream of them. Why? Because the vault is no longer just a place. It's a myth, a metaphor for something out of reach, something impenetrable, and something worth the risk. And so, what had to exist before a bank robbery was possible? We had to build the ultimate protection. Not just locks, not just steel, not just walls, but confidence. We had to convince the world what's inside is untouchable. And in doing so, we created an irresistible dare. Because if temptation is the root of theft, then security is the trigger. Every vault is a question, and somewhere, someone is always trying to answer it. Before you can rob a bank, you need a reason not to, or at least a consequence. Because a robbery isn't just an act, it's an act against something. A law, a code, a system, a society. And without that system, there's no such thing as a crime, only survival. So this is how robbery became real, not just as a deed, but as a violation of civilization itself. Long before nations, courts, or even written laws, theft wasn't theft. It was life. If you were hungry, you took. If someone had more, you challenged. If you lost, well, it was over. Ownership wasn't moral. It was physical, tribal, relational. But then cities grew, currency spread, temples became banks, and for the first time, we needed something else. Order. And with it, consequences. One of the oldest legal codes ever discovered, Code of Hammurabi, 1754 BCE, Babylon. Not just a list of rules, a statement of transformation. It laid out crimes, categories, punishments. To rob a temple? That was to rob the gods. The punishment? Exile or death. Even then, robbery wasn't just a violation. It was a sacred betrayal. The harshness wasn't just for deterrence. It was symbolic. A way to define property as something almost divine. By ancient Rome, law had evolved. So had crime. The cohorts urbani kept order. The vigils watched the streets, the fires, the shadows. The first beat-cops, the first systemized patrols. But Rome's most radical idea? Crime on paper. The Lex Julia Devi Publica under the Augustus made distinctions. Furtum, theft, quiet and cunning. Rapina, robbery, violent and direct. Rome didn't just punish the act. It classified how the act was done and who it harmed. Theft was personal. Robbery, public. In medieval Europe, justice fragmented. Each lord had his own laws, each region its own punishments. One town fined you, another branded you, a third hung you from a gate. There was no map for law, only borders. This chaos sparked fear. Merchants couldn't travel safely. Villages feared raiders more than armies. No one knew what protection really meant. So the people asked, who will protect us? And slowly, the answer emerged. The state. Fast forward now to 1829, London. Industrial Revolution. Urban boom, urban crime. Sir Robert Peel launches the Metropolitan Police. They wear uniforms, walk beats, report to a public commissioner. They aren't soldiers, and they aren't mercenaries. They are citizen guards. Peel's principles still quoted today. Police exist to prevent crime. Power comes from public approval, and force is the last resort. And now, for the first time, robbery wasn't just a sin. It wasn't just local. It was a national breach, a public act. A crime not just against a person, but against order itself. As policing evolved, so did investigations. The case file, the detective, the fingerprint, the mugshot, the motive. Crime became a narrative. It could be reconstructed, understood, solved. In the US, the Pinkertons arrived in the 1850s, the FBI in 1908. Robbers now faced national agents, surveillance, forensics, files that followed them across borders. And as law enforcement got smarter, criminals evolved. Thus was born the mastermind, the planner, the ghost, the man you couldn't catch. Then came a twist. The more we tried to stop robbery, the more we defined it. New legal labels emerged: petty theft, grand larceny, burglary, embezzlement, armed robbery, bank robbery. Each label brought different punishments, different reputations, and different myths. Bank robbery rose to the top. Why? Because it wasn't random, it wasn't desperate. It was a crime of precision, design, and defiance. And as laws grew stricter, tactics grew smarter. An eternal loop began. Law builds rules, crime tests them. Today, bank robbery isn't about what was taken. It's about how, from where, and why. Modern law defines robbery as the unlawful taking of property from a person or place through force or threat of force. And that force doesn't have to be used, only implied. The intent? Premeditated, deliberate, symbolic. Robbery isn't about money. It's about challenging the system that protects it, which means robbery is defined by the very rules it breaks. So, what had to exist before bank robbery was possible? A legal system, a definition of property, a force to guard it, and a story to enforce it. Because robbery isn't just a crime, it's a statement that someone chose to cross a line that society agreed no one should cross. And that line, it wasn't drawn with vaults, it wasn't drawn with weapons. It was drawn with law. Now that value was protected, the next invention wasn't designed to save it. It was designed to steal it. The vault, the disguise, the blueprint, the getaway. Welcome to the age of criminal innovation. Before someone robs a bank, they have to make a decision, a quiet one, a private one. And it doesn't start with a weapon, or a plan, or even the bank. It starts with something far more dangerous, a thought. This is why people rob banks. Not how, but why. Because behind every heist is a human mind, and inside that mind is a reason. Let's begin with a myth. People rob banks because they're desperate. Sometimes, yes. But often, it's far more complex. Because if someone just wants money, there are easier, safer ways to get it. Theft, fraud, online scams, low security targets. But a bank robbery? That's public. That's high risk. That requires planning. It's not a survival crime, it's a symbolic one. People don't rob banks just for the cash. They rob banks to prove something to themselves, to society, to the system. It's not just about what they take. It's about who they become when they take it. For centuries, culture hasn't just punished criminals, it's romanticized them. Robin Hood stole from the rich, gave to the poor. Jesse James, Southern folk hero with a gun. Bonnie and Clyde, lovers on the run, now sit in the legends. Why do we glorify the outlaw? Because the outlaw offers us something primal. Freedom from the system, revenge against injustice, control in a world of chaos. The outlaw says it's not just fiction. It's a template, an identity, a way to matter. Let's go deeper, inside the brain. When someone plans a heist, two regions light up. The nucleus accumbens, dopamine, anticipation, reward, and the prefrontal cortex, planning, risk judgment, control. Together, a dangerous cocktail. The brain craves reward. It simulates success. And if emotions override logic, risk becomes addictive. Studies show some habitual criminals feel the highest dopamine spike not when they succeed, but when they plan. It's not just the money, it's the buildup, the adrenaline, the chess game. To some, the bank isn't a building, it's a puzzle. And solving it, that's the high. Many robbers, especially lone ones, aren't chasing riches. They're chasing power. They want to control a system that once controlled them. Prove they can beat the odds, humiliate the powerful, and escape invisibility. Take Albert Spaghetti, the mastermind of the 1976 Société Générale heist. His team tunneled from the sewers, bypassed every alarm, and left a note in the vault. Without hatred, without weapons, without violence. He didn't just want the money, he wanted immortality. To him, it wasn't theft, it was art. And the bank, his canvas. Movies don't just depict heists, they shape them. From the Great Train Robbery, 1903, to the more current Ocean's 11, Heat, Inside Man, Money Heist. Cinema redefines the robbery, not as desperation, but as a performance, a mission, the mind game. It feeds the fantasy, what if I could do it and get away clean? Some real-life robbers even admit they weren't inspired by the technique. They were inspired by the aesthetic. They wanted to be calm, clever, and cool. They weren't just committing a crime, they were playing a role. Here's another paradox, though. Most career criminals, gangs, cartels, mafias, don't rob banks. Why? Too risky, too public, too chaotic. Bank robbers are often outsiders, drifters, ex-employees, unemployed visionaries, runaways, rarely the psychotic. They don't want to join the underworld. They want to leave their mark on the world, even for just a moment. That's the heist mind. Not a careerist, but a performer on a stage they built for themselves. Most robbers fail, but some become legends. In 1950, the Brinks job in Boston, 2.7 million stolen, no fingerprints. Masks, precision, planning. The press called it a crime of the century. Books followed, movies were made, a myth was born. Yes, they were caught, but by then, they were already icons. Because to some, the goal isn't escape, it's remembrance. Even infamy is better than invisibility. When the world ignores you, being the villain is still a form of power. So, what had to exist before bank robbery was possible? Well, not just currency, not just vaults, and not just guards or codes, but a mind, capable of looking at it all and saying, What if I could take it? What if I could win? Robbery doesn't begin with a weapon. It begins with a belief, a reason, a story. Because every vault says, stay out. And somewhere, someone will always whisper, try and stop me. Before a robbery can happen, it has to be imagined. And in the modern world, that imagination doesn't come from the whispers in the dark or legends told around campfires. It comes from headlines, screens, novels, tweets, podcasts, and films. The bank robbery isn't just a crime anymore, it's a genre, a trope, a blueprint. This is how storytelling itself made the robbery repeatable. The moment news became printable, crime became profitable. In the 1800s, newspapers exploded across Europe and the United States. Fighting for circulation, they needed stories that shocked, entertained, outraged, and captured imagination. Bank robberies were perfect. Big money, public spectacle, chases, mystery, names to remember, faces to fear or admire. In 1866, Jesse James robbed a Clay County bank in Missouri, possibly the first successful daylight bank robbery in U.S. history. But what made him famous? Wasn't the heists. It was the reporting. Papers called him a Confederate Avenger, a noble rebel, a folk hero. And suddenly, he wasn't a criminal anymore. He was a character. Newspapers didn't just report crime. They designed it. Books, pulp fiction, early crime columns, they built myths. Patterns emerged. The masked outlaw, the charming anti-hero, the silent mastermind, the tragic partner in crime, the one last job narrative. Sound familiar? These weren't invented by Hollywood. They were born in print when journalists realized a robbery isn't just an event, it's a format. And formats spread. They copy, they inspire. Then came radio. The 1920s and 30s. Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson. Not just headlines now, soundtracks, live updates, breathless bulletins, criminals turned into serials. Families gather around radios the same way we now scroll TikTok. Lawmen became protagonists, criminals became legends. By the 1940s, some stations aired dramatized reenactment of robberies. Reality and fiction began to blur. The message was clear. You don't need to rob a bank to be famous, but if you do it well enough, you'll never be forgotten. And then came film. The Great Train Robbery of 1903 locked the heist into cinema forever. But over time, something changed. Movies didn't just show robbery, they designed it. Rafifi, 1955, a silent break-in scene that real robbers studied. The Thomas Crown Affair, 1968, heist as fashion. Heat, 1995, tactical realism. Inside Man, 2006, misdirection as art. Money Heist, 2017, revolution disguised as theft. They weren't just stories, they were manuals, in mindset, if not in method. They taught audiences to fantasize, to plan, to perform. The bank became more than a place, it became a stage. Some robbers didn't hide their inspiration, they announced it. 2008, a man in Austria robs a bank wearing a Joker mask. Early 2000s, US robbers mimic Point Break wearing president masks. South Africa, a gang calls themselves Ocean's 13. Even the famous 1976 Société Générale heist, a multi-day underground break-in in France, felt like something written for a movie. Media doesn't cause crime, but it curates the imagination. You're not stealing anymore, you're acting. The line between real and performative disappears. Now we live online. Every robbery, every getaway, every courtroom smirk can be shared, hashtagged, streamed, parodied, memified. TikTok is full of dark academia heist montages, POV bank robber skits, true crime ASMR, soundtracks made for a crew walking in slow motion. Podcasts dramatize the heists with suspenseful music. YouTube ranks them by scale, precision, style. Your crime is no longer the crime. The story is. And the better your story, the more powerful your heist becomes, even if you fail. This is what I call the blueprint effect. When media repeats a robbery, it doesn't just report it, it teaches it. Bank layouts, response times, guard shifts, legal loopholes, forensic blind spots. Over time, fiction becomes instruction. Real heists become case studies. Fiction becomes proof of concept. The 2005 Banco Central robbery in Brazil, one of the biggest in history. A Netflix series is made about it now. But the crew who pulled it off studied sewer systems, tracked guard schedules, mapped the vault. They didn't just imagine the heist, they researched it, like a screenwriter would. And so the loop continues. Real life becomes story. Story becomes inspiration. And inspiration becomes a blueprint. So, what had to exist before bank robbery was ever possible? Well, we needed money. Abstract, portable, powerful. We needed banks to concentrate that power. We needed vaults and locks to protect it. We needed laws to define what it meant to take it. We needed minds willing to imagine the impossible. And we needed stories to turn crime into legacy. This wasn't just about theft. It was about everything we had to build before someone could try and break it. A bank robbery is never just a crime. It's a consequence, a mirror, held up to civilization, revealing what we value, what we fear, and what we dare to protect. Thank you for watching all the way through. History isn't just what happened, it's the blueprint for what might happen next. If you'd like to keep exploring the hidden forces shaping our world, dive into another of the stories on this channel. But let me know in the comments, what piece of our world today might inspire tomorrow's perfect crime? See you in the next one.